mindset is also out of whack.
Yeah.
Emotions, right? Because of the hormones.
Yep.
So we get what's called post-show blues. And for anyone who is thinking about stepping on stage, you need to get your mind right before you even think about changing your body.
For sure.
And that comes with lifestyle in general. You want to show up and you want to drink and you want to party and you want to go and define party, right? Because my party is different than most people's.
Yeah.
But like,
it's building houses. Huh?
Yeah, right. That's a good party. So if you want to do these things that are harming your body, but you want to show up and say you're healthy, then what are you doing to change those actions mentally and emotionally beyond the physical, right? Because people say they want these things, but they're not putting in the mental and emotional work.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Nichols and Dime Show. I'm your host, Chris Nichols. Today, our guest is Breanna Beaver. Bree is a bodybuilder, host of the M3 podcast, and an inner health coach. We talk about her methodology that she uses in her coaching called M3. It's also the name of her podcast, and it stands for Mindset, Movement, and Medicine. We talk about Bree's early life encounters, lessons learned from bodybuilding, and getting past post-show blues, which is a part of bodybuilding that many coaches don't talk about. They just focus on getting the person looking ready for show day, and then they say goodbye. So this is actually a big part of Bree's current coaching program. We talk about adding more balance into the picture beyond just the fitness aspect, which is really how she grew her career. But we do get pretty philosophical in this podcast about certain experiences Bree had when she was young, exposure to entrepreneurship, traumatic experiences she's encountered, and how this has affected her mindset and what she's learned about resilience along the way. We also talk about the theme that has come up on the Nichols and Dime Show that I've talked about a number of times, which is the idea of putting yourself in challenging or uncomfortable situations in order to grow. I really enjoyed this episode with Bree, and I think you will find some value in it as well. Now, please enjoy. Breanna Beaver, what's going on?
Hi, I'm great. How are you?
Thanks so much for having me. I'm stoked we're finally doing our podcast.
Me too. It's been a long time coming. I know I've been out of the country for a little bit, but as soon as I got back, you're like, hey, what's up? You down? I'm like, yeah, I'm down.
That's right. That's what it takes. And speaking of that, you've been all over the place. What's been going on with all this travel?
Yeah. I set out a goal to see more of the world. I just needed something different than my day-to-day routine. And you and I were talking before we sat down where our bubble of PB is a very nice bubble. We're very comfortable here. And we even talked about putting ourselves in places that provide a little bit more discomfort. So I posted about this on social media today saying, I really like doing things that challenge me and expand my horizons and show me that there's different cultures or different perspectives, right? So it allows me to just break away from the things that I think are small problems in this world or like big problems and realize are very small to this big world.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So where have you been so far this year?
Started with Mexico, then went to Thailand, then all over Indonesia for about 6 weeks. Went to Japan and Hawaii, and then just finished up Alaska. I came back from Alaska a couple days ago.
Wow. That's incredible. And you got a lot more coming too, right?
Yeah. I'm actually leaving in a couple of days again for my sister's graduation across the country. And then going from there, doing a big, deep inner work trip in Costa Rica later this year too.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
Well, that's exciting. And I'm sure we're going to overlap into what you've learned from all these travel experiences, especially just with personal growth in general. I think that's the best thing about traveling, especially to places that are so different than what we're used to. And yes, PB is a bubble. It's a wonderful bubble. We love it, but it definitely is a bubble. It's easy to get stuck, right?
Don't pop it. Just kidding.
That's good. Oh man. Well, I'm stoked to get into your journey. And I think a good place to start would be a very relevant topic with what you're going through right now. And then we'll dive back into some of your history and catch up to where we are today and what's ahead. But I want to start off with something that you're going through. You're going through a rebrand, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've been associated with the brand name or term Mermaid for a while.
I mean, you look around this house and what do you see?
It's true. I'm looking at a mermaid on the wall right now. We've got Mermaid over here in the quote. And
they're all behind you too.
Yeah. That's funny. You're a mermaid. I was actually Honu growing up, which is turtle in Hawaiian. So I've got a whole bunch of turtles in my house.
That is my favorite sea animal too. So them and seahorses, I love them both. Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
so you get it. Yeah.
Yeah, the tattoos.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
So Mermaid has been a big part of me and my brand. And I would even say my identity for 7 years plus. And I've always loved mermaids growing up. To backtrack my story here, just giving you a little context or background, is I worked at a cafe when I came out of high school and wanted my independence. I wasn't in a really good relationship with my parents at the time. And I said, I can do this on my own. I'm going to live by the beach. I want to be that surfer girl, right? I'm going to go work at a cafe right on the beach. And it was called, it actually still exists. It's just different now, but it's called Katie's Cafe in Imperial Beach down south. And it's a very cute, small, tight-knit cafe where we were the baristas, we were the hosts. We greeted you, we made your drink, we got you at the cash register, we made your food, we bussed your table, we talked to you the whole time, and you felt like it was, and we catered to a lot of Navy SEALs going through BUDS training. So they were coming there wanting that sense of comfort and home, and just maybe somebody who was kind and compassionate that could just soften the experience that they were going through. Yeah. Because we'd see people with crutches and, you know, just a lot of injuries, beaten up. They had maybe not slept for 7 days straight on a mission. And, you know, they came back and they're just looking for biscuits and gravy. And so food has always been a love language of mine. And I love feeding people and having conversations that way, which makes sense why you and I understand the podcast life.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And also to San Diego natives, you grew up here, right?
Yes. Yeah. And so Katie, just to backtrack there again, is she taught me a lot about entrepreneurship. And I watched somebody who struggled with alcoholism, and it was hard because I would run a restaurant or run a cafe, right? And it was me and my roommate. My roommate Jocelyn and I lived together about a block away from Katie. And Katie's this beautiful 50-year-old hippie at the time that would go to Costa Rica with her love guy that she was with. And I'm saying love guy because that was a very long story. But
you said love guide?
Yeah, like love guy in her life. Yeah. So she's been an inspiration, but she was also my savior and protector. Like I said, I wasn't very close to my parents at that time. And she felt like a mother figure to me. She was there to ward off any boys that were, you know, causing trouble, or if I, you know, really cared about somebody, then she would bring them in and make them feel like family. And so she was somebody I looked up to, not just in her aura of the mermaid, right? Like she would ditch interviews like this to go and surf. She'd say like, sorry, something came up, and she didn't care about this life. She didn't care about marketing herself. She just wanted to be married to her business and have that simplicity of feeding people with food. She's wanted to create a home that way. Wow. So I love that. I love that you make people feel hospitable and you make them feel welcomed and acknowledged and heard, and you're feeding them, right? You're fueling them. Yeah. This makes sense why I'm in the field that I'm in now. For sure. So she taught me a lot about going to the bank and doing drop deposits and running registers and going through the receipts and doing audits and making orders and going to the grocery store if we ran out of things and having to pull up money, being in charge of tracking and paper rolling everything. I ran paper roll. We distributed our tips. We understood how to give ourselves bonuses. Like we were really much in control of our own jobs there. And we even did our own scheduling and made it work for everybody. Wow. So it was a very beautiful system to see everyone work in flow, and that it was all females. That to me was something very rare. I think we had one guy who helped close the night shift because sometimes it got sketch. Sure. So yeah.
Especially in IB way back then.
Yeah, huh? Yeah. You know, it's right next to the plank. So I was like, oh, but you know about the plank. I do, yes. Yeah. If you're from San Diego, or even if you've like really lived here, you know about the plank. Oh yeah. So he would come and help us close, but it was pretty much female predominant. And I just, again, loved learning from Katie. I valued her. I looked up to her. And I think that sparked my interest in what she was doing and to replicate it into my own way. It ended up becoming health and fitness from there, which we'll probably transition into. But she taught me a lot about how to manage things, because there were times where she was real. She's human, right? So she slipped up and she would either miss a couple days of work because we didn't hear from her, and she'd go binge drink. And we would come to her house and give her food and try to sober her. Like, we were caretaking too. So it taught me a lot of how I needed to step up and be a leader, because I needed to show up when somebody else couldn't show up for herself. And yet that was somebody I looked up to, and I wanted to be in that role. So I felt even more obligated to maybe make her proud, but also at the same time, take the opportunity. This is giving me something to learn from here, and to help her too. I just really cared about her.
I love how you started giving that background, because a big part of how I like to begin these shows, since we focus on the entrepreneurial journey, entrepreneurship in general, is how did you become that way? How did you get this entrepreneur spirit from? And that's such a cool example. Who knew that you could get that from working in a restaurant? But the way you described it, you did everything from the full customer experience, start to finish, greeting them as a hostess, and then bussing everything at the end and making the food, serving them. That I love that you shared that. And I do have some questions to follow up just from that, because I do want to understand this idea of stepping up. How did that, I'm curious how that translated maybe in your family life as a young girl. But before we get there, I just want to ask you, the word mermaid, right? Did that come from Katie? How did that come about?
Her actual image on the cafe is mermaids. If you go into her cafe, and that's why I said it's not the same as it used to be, because when she passed, they took all of the personal belongings out of there. What it is Katie didn't buy those things to decorate the restaurant or the cafe. Katie was gifted every single piece in that place. And I'm telling you, this place was decked out, completely decked out from head to toe. And it was fun to see everyone's reflection of love for her in the city show up like that. So you felt the warmth just walking in.
Yeah.
And that is where, I know this sounds kind of funny, but I'm looking around and I've maybe bought a few pieces. I think that's one of the only pieces I can think of in this room that I've bought.
Wow.
But everything else in here that is a mermaid thing is a gift to me. And that is so cool.
I love
that I'm like, people see me that way, you know? Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, well, we're going to, later in this conversation, I'm sure we're going to talk about their transition from mermaid to what you're doing now. But I think this is a good time to learn about your family backgrounds. So your father was in the Marines, right?
Yes.
And you grew up in San Diego.
Yes.
What was your life like? How would you describe your childhood?
I know that this has been a common pattern for many entrepreneurs, where they say they grow up in chaos and having to adapt in maybe just constant changing situations. So I think the adaptability and how do I put this? The adaptability is the easiest part of how you can evolve in a business and evolve as an identity of who you are beyond what you do, where you live, the things you see and experience, your thoughts, right? But the chaos is something that provides inner peace. And that's something where I laugh with friends, because I am like, we can be in a room full of chaos and we can work and jam out, because that gives us a trigger for inner peace. We tune into ourselves, we can focus. And I actually like, if you notice, we have a flickering candle. I like things that give a little bit of noise, because the complete silence leaves me with my thoughts. And I was an only child growing up for many years. I'm a child of 4 divorces. I adapted a lot. And when I needed to grow up, because I had parents who either were choosing relationships over family and not, showing up at home when they needed to, and I had to make myself food, or I'd stay the night at a friend's house for like a month in a row. So there were things that made me also step up, similar to the business. I knew when I needed to take the role, or when there was a turning point, that no one's going to come and save you, like they always say, right?
Right.
So it's like, how are you going to show up for this life that you're given? It's like, do you surrender to it? Are you victim, or can you handle the chaos and find the peace to grow? So I love that I adapted. I constantly was moving. Yes, born in San Diego, moved to Oregon, came back here, moved back, came back here. I went to 3 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, 2 high schools, 4 colleges.
Because of your dad.
Constant moving. And it was also the divorces too. So moving and divorces between the two. And then my dad actually went from special forces to become a SWAT and K-9 officer, and very tactical. So I learned a lot of my logical side from him. I've built a lot of discipline, a lot of strength, a lot of routine practice from him. But then with my mom, she's Mexican, full on Hispanic. My family is super warm and loving. Again, we talk about food as our love language, right? You come in, are you hungry? Nope. Well, you're still eating anyway. You know, like it's disrespectful if you don't eat the food. Right. So. You don't love me, right? So,
one part of the culture that I love.
Yes. And I love the balance between the two. So I have these tattoos on my wrist, and it's kind of funny how I look at them and think like, oh, there's my mom, there's my dad showing up. And so to me, I always say like, my mom is love. She to me embodies love fully. Everything is, she can be mad at me and then come back and be like, forgot about what she was mad about 10 minutes later. She just wants love. And I then see my dad, who is strength. And to him, it's like, you're not challenging yourself enough. You're not pushing harder. Do you feel this? Is that, you know how people talk about the motivation between pain and pleasure? He loved gratifying the difference between the two. And I actually talked about this recently. I had a conversation with a friend talking about positive and negative reinforcement. And my dad is somebody who would rather actually do the negative reinforcement to scare and fear. And I'm somebody who responds better to positive reinforcement these days. Now, I like the small wins. So the chaos in it has been a lot of I've seen things that I shouldn't have maybe seen as a kid growing up. I've witnessed affairs. I've witnessed abuse. I've witnessed a lot in a death of a family member. My sister had passed away. So my stepmom was suicidal. I learned about being suicidal, and that's something I almost feel like made it more acceptable for me to carry on as a trait from there. So when and I'm actually realizing this in real time right now, is I was 12, 13 when everything was going on. My brother had just been born, and my dad was having an affair at the time. So I had to keep the secret. I knew about the affair. That was a really hard thing to do.
Oh, because it wasn't your mom's son.
Yes. And so my brother had just been born 2-3 months before. And I had kept the secret for about a month and a half, but it was like, as long as a 12, 13-year-old could really keep a secret.
That's hard.
So I ended up telling her, and again, is the chaos of it all. But I saw a lot of things, witnessed, and had to learn about integrity. And it's weird because I saw that lack of integrity in somebody who taught me integrity, who taught me the value of being honest and works in the justice system, made me lie. And you recognize those things as a kid, you don't forget that. And so that's where lying and integrity became a big part of my moral and core values in my life today.
Wow.
Yes.
Whew.
So where were we?
That's super helpful context of sharing where you come from, the kind of environment. And it sounds like that played a huge role in your motivation to take your life, your career a certain direction, right? Yes. Or at least more than anything, the impact you want to have in your life in the world.
And I am also Hispanic, like I had mentioned, English is actually my second language.
Really?
So I grew up and learned from Hooked on Phonics. If anyone out there is 90s baby and knows that, 80s, 90s baby, yeah. Hooked on Phonics was my jam. And I actually had to learn it because I moved with my dad and I couldn't speak to him. So he was actually speaking Spanish to me. And then we got into the system and learned from there. And thank you, Hooked on Phonics, whoever created it.
Yeah, but incredible.
I realized that was an insecurity of mine is number one, not being able to speak up. Number two, I have a deep passion for singing. I love singing. I know I have an amazing voice, but when it gets me to be in front of somebody else, there's something with that vocal part of me that I can't speak up. And I've learned that in different situations that have also changed my life completely. Like I had mentioned to you before, if I didn't speak up, where would my life be right now? Right. So podcasting is teaching me how to speak up for myself. And I think those are things where I've had, like my dad telling me to be quiet, keep secrets, like all these. So for me, it was hard to be in a place where I adapted and then, like something would break you and you feel like, well, then where's home? And I've had that for the longest time right now is where is home for me? So I've been traveling to feel like, oh, home is in my heart. Home is here.
Yeah.
I don't need to find home with my parents. Like I've recognized that from what they've taught me. I don't need to find home in a 4 square wall building, right? It's not the items or the materials. It's what's inside. So like I'm getting on tangents here, but do you have anything that you want to chime in on too? Because I can keep going.
I love that, Bree. No, I mean, that's one thing I've learned as well. Somebody who's moved around, and I was born here in Coronado, San Diego, and grew up in Hawaii. And my family was new to Hawaii when we went there, right? We started from square zero of building a community out there. And then I've lived in a number of different states since then. And I've found my home back here in San Diego over the past few years. But the way I look at that is the community you build or you find, the right people you surround yourself by is what makes something home. It makes a place home, I believe. It's about the people, because I've been in places where I felt so at home because of the community. And then I'll go back years later when everyone's left. Great example of that was San Francisco. I lived there and then COVID came and everything changed. But I felt like such a foreigner going back there when everyone I knew had pretty much gone. So that's how I look at home. But I love that. I think that's very connected to what you're saying about it's in the heart, right? And having that love surround you, that the right community, and that's okay. That evolves and changes over time, I believe, and people change and they go different directions. But that's just a part of the course of life that we have to learn to adapt to. And it sounds like you got those lessons really early on with the family experiences you had.
Yes, it's being a grown up when you shouldn't need to be. So I feel like a lot of me now as a grown up still wants to be a child. In a fun way, sometimes not. You understand.
Yes. Well, I want to take all that background you just shared about your childhood, and it's powerful. It's intense, and relate that to how you got your motivation or your determination to pursue your career. And it sounds like bodybuilding was really what you started with. How did you get started in bodybuilding? You studied something along the lines of that, fitness related, health related in college, right?
So I initially wanted to go to school to be a marine biologist. I love the ocean. I love marine life.
You study mermaids.
Yes, could be in the water all day long. It is a very complicating major. And to be a freshman in college, having 8 a.m. labs Monday through Friday, every single day, taking 22, 24 credits a week, I was like, for that semester, is just too much.
Oh, yeah.
And I switched over to I wanted to be an elementary school teacher. And the change in that came from the children part, right? I really wanted to educate. I want to inspire kids. They lit me up. There's something missing about what I desired with being there and teaching kids something different than I maybe learned in my childhood, and giving them more love, pouring all of that into them, right? Teaching them about nutrition, teaching them kindness. We don't get taught that as kids. In fact, I think we're just told not to bully, but we don't understand what the other option is.
Yeah.
So I put that into having clients now, which is really cool with my business, where things like being a marine biologist, I go and do things that make that a hobby for me. I go spend time on the sea or in the ocean, or that, give me that craving or satisfaction to the craving that I have. The same thing happens with the children. I have clients who are teachers who I get to go and speak at their schools, and I really love being able to educate kids that way. I also love the fact that I go down to Mexico, and you and I think we've talked about this before. Right. Yes. And the house builds, the experiences that I get to be on there, the orphanages that we get to work with, the migrant camps, the feeding programs, it's different. It's very different to see somebody so joyful and lit up over the most simplest things in life.
That's so cool. Get back to your bodybuilding.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Why did you get into bodybuilding?
Well, initially I wanted the 6-pack abs, right? Didn't everybody?
Don't we all? Yeah.
I said for the longest time, I want a 6-pack. I want a 6-pack. I never have had a 6-pack, right? And
why do you think that was? Because of the community you grew up surrounded by through your father and being around, a lot of the military and SEALs, stuff like that. It's just having, this fitness culture was a big thing. Is that why?
So I initially liked fitness already. I had turned into the major. Thankfully, I'm one of the few people in our bubble of fitness coaches that actually has a master's degree in this and understands kinesiology. So thankfully, I wanted this before it was a cool post-COVID thing to do, right?
That's such a profound comment in San Diego where we live.
Yes.
In our community, because every other person seems to be a personal trainer.
Yes. Or people move here when they make it and they're like, I'm going to come to this. And I'm like, it's okay. Yeah. And for anybody that's out there thinking that it's too saturated, my opinion is it's not. I always drive around. I go to like places like our fancy Rancho Santa Fe area. And I'm like, there is plenty of money to go around. There are plenty of clients and customers. We have a big city full of people. We're just stuck with the same 50 people that we see on our Instagram feeds, like the most shown up, right?
Yep. We
see in the gym every day. And so we think that that's the only bubble that exists in this world. But there's so many people that are attracted to learning from you and understanding the mindset of the entrepreneur. There's so many people who are attracted to me and knowing how did you build glutes or how did you step on stage, right? And I still have that every day, people asking questions, which is great because you and I don't necessarily know if we want to do what we want to do, right? You had a different job before, and I've tried to get rid of fitness, which is where I'm at right now, rebranding, because that is what I'm known for. That is a part of who I am. And I am surrendering to accepting that identity because I wanted to throw in the towel and say, I don't want to do this anymore. I quit. I don't want to live in San Diego anymore. I don't want this job. I'm done. But I was really burnt out. I had a point where it needed to cut a clean break for me to get my mind straight, to get myself straight. And there were so many people I was taking care of beyond myself that it wasn't healthy for me to show up that way for them. It wasn't the best that I could show up if it was in that way.
Yeah.
And I went into bodybuilding initially, like I said, for the exterior portion, right?
Yep.
And then post-show blues are a real thing. If you don't have what
was it?
Post-show blues, right?
What is this?
So anybody who understands the competition world, you go through what's called
post-show blues.
Yes.
Gotcha. Yes.
You go through what's called, and maybe for somebody who's not familiar with this world, you have the competition prep. You go through a training prep, which is usually 3, 4, sometimes 6 months longer. And when you finish that prep, you have the time where you step on stage and you hit your peak, right? We have a peak week. When you're done peaking, your body has finished its peak. We have this part where our metabolism is trying to figure itself out. Our hormones are trying to figure themselves out. We're trying to regulate our food appetite control, right? Mindset is also out of whack.
Yeah.
Emotions, right? Because of the hormones.
Yep.
So we get what's called post-show blues. And for anyone who is thinking about stepping on stage, you need to get your mind right before you even think about changing your body.
For sure.
And that comes with lifestyle in general. You want to show up and you want to drink and you want to party and you want to go and define party, right? Because my party is different than most people's.
Yeah.
But
it's building houses. Huh?
Yeah, right. That's a good party. So if you want to do these things that are harming your body, but you want to show up and say you're healthy, then what are you doing to change those actions mentally and emotionally beyond the physical, right? Because people say they want these things, but they're not putting in the mental and emotional work. And at first I went through that desire to put myself through it, and I was making myself unhealthier inside. I was putting processed foods in my body, understanding that macros were whatever, and I can eat a protein bar 5 times a day, right? Protein shake, protein bar, no big deal. What are vegetables? Then I was having a coach tell me to do a bunch of cardio and to not, my strength training was just a little bit different than it is now. So I felt like I was actually just doing a bunch of cardio, not really strength training. And then it went to the nutrition part where I was not being fed enough fat. And my peak week fat grams in total were down to 19 grams. So, I mean, if you, anybody who's familiar with this, it's a little over 2 tablespoons of peanut butter for the whole day.
Wow.
And so if you eat a chicken, that's got a gram or 2 of fat. If you eat any sort of like cheese, fat-free cheese, right? You have to be careful with how you eat your food. So monitoring everything, I started to psych myself out on the control factors that related to the physique. I realized that there was a lot more that my body wasn't processing healthy wise that I was going through at that same time frame. So I had started my first competition. I think I was prepping 2017, 2018 for a show in 2018. And then I actually went to a trip to Bali, and a girl that I met out there on a retreat had said, "Hey, you should step on stage. I'm a coach. You've got the physique. I think you should do this. You do really well." And she was right. Like they have this image that they're looking for, and it is a very hourglass, skinnier type for bikini, and my body knows how to lose weight, like no problem. But when it came to the parts of me that I was neglecting, like I dealt with a court case, I dealt with sexual assault, I dealt with things that completely belittled how I viewed my exterior world and the respect that I had for it. I actually despised my body. I was disgusted with it. I despised the world that I was living in and the routines, the day by day. I was disgusted with it. And it's funny how I think every time you think you get yourself out of these little places, but you have to constantly, for anybody that's doing a program, doing prep, doing some sort of transformation in their lives, there has to be a maintenance parts to it that ends that, which is where I'll get to with what I'm creating right now, because I realize that that's the part that everybody slips up on. We go through the transformation, we forget the maintenance, that this is a lifestyle. It's not just a program. It's not just a temporary prep. You're not going to do this for one day to step on stage. You're doing this for life. I hope that's, to me, that is longevity. That is health to me. And I recognized while I'm dealing with all these things, I'm neglecting my mental health. I'm neglecting my emotional. I'm neglecting my relationships. I'm neglecting everything that could deal with wellness, right? The environmental part. I just allowed myself to suffer because I wanted this one physical goal so bad. And then I started diving into the inner work, that deep, deep work. And it's still an ugly process because I'm still coming out of the hole. And I'm not proud of a lot of things that I've had to deal with to get through that. But I am proud of myself for learning to stand up, pick myself up, grow up, and be the person that says, like, this isn't me. This isn't who I am. This isn't my identity. And I can do better. I can do more, right? There's more in this world than the cell or the gel that we create when we feel like we're stuck, because we're responsible for that.
This is fascinating. You just brought it all together for me with what I wanted to talk about more than anything on this podcast, because I was very interested in how you went from your pure fitness focus, bodybuilding, coaching people to compete. And then how does that translate into the expansion you've walked into with how you're helping people? And you brought your personal experiences from not just bodybuilding itself, but the entire lifestyle of it, and the hard parts of that, the post-show blues, coming back from, all the struggles mentally, physically, or emotionally, spiritually, that you've dealt with and you still are dealing with, right? It's a continuous journey. And so you're being very real with people, with the audience, the clients you're helping, about the bigger picture. And that's where you're coming in to help them, instead of just, hey, let's get you to the finish line, AKA the show, right? Making sure you look good and then you figure it out from there. And then you're depressed after that. Like, you're there to make sure that there's balance in life while also still trying to reach a big goal, perhaps in the fitness world. Is that fair to say? Yes.
I also feel like a lot of the mindset shifts were exemplified in the gym when I was doing the physical work, relating it to the emotional and the mental. And that is the repetitions that we talk about with putting these episodes out, are the same repetitions that we talk about with showing up on a date and being present and having deeper conversations, and maybe showing up at your job and getting a tenure, right? 10 years down the road, you put in the repetitions. So for me, I go to the gym, and putting in the repetitions is pretty easy to me. So I'm bored working out, right? Where does the mind go? I want to be challenged. So I relate to these things, and I start talking to myself while I'm working out, a lot of inner dialogue conditioning, and ask, how is this relating to my life right now? Where do I feel this? And I actually play a little bit of somatics into it. So where do I feel this in my body? What's the stress? What am I thinking about when that trigger point hits, right? What's going on there? What do we need to address? And it's been a lot of playing into the tune of my body. It's the sound of it, right? What do I want my vibration to be at? And it went from doing all the extremities to then I hired a different coach. I have a male coach who works with females really well, understands the hormones, was like, no, you need a lot more fats. Actually, anybody out there on prep, if you're less than 40 grams of fat, I don't think that's healthy for anybody. And that's just me. Anything less than that is like, what?
Sure.
So, and that's an extreme too. For me, that's like peak week. So I want people to eat healthy. I want them to have good hormone and just emotional health too. And then I realized, like, if I ask my body, what do you want today? It's not like, hey, we want a day off and we're not going to really do our training program. It's, we need to show up today. How is the best effort going to show up? Some days shit hits the fan and you're crying and you don't want to go work out. You just go and get the double workout in tomorrow or the next day, right? And you can make it work. But just being kinder to yourself, I think, was a big part of that for me, was learning how to evolve and adapt with the fitness part of it. But then I went from one federation that wanted me super skinny to, you know what, that's not what I desire. And I went to a different federation that liked a little bit curvier, and curvier by design means like 5-10 more pounds, not much. Yeah. And just to put it into context, like, I mean, yes, I'm probably praising myself here, is I have a strong physique. I have a body I'm proud of. I have a mind and a heart that I'm proud of. And every day I have to work on it. Some days I'm more proud than others. I have to work on it. But the main part of it is, when I was talking about those repetitions, it's what are the uncomfortable situations, right? The stressful situations that you're going to put yourself in that give you the results that don't give you instant gratification, that give you pride instead. I think pride is part of the ego, but to me, it's on the higher up level where it shows you the amount that you've put in to give yourself the sense of fulfillment.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And thanks for sharing that. And I did have one question from some of the tough experiences you mentioned when you were so focused on the exterior part of bodybuilding. Do you think those came along because of the community you got into and maybe the toxic side of bodybuilding, and that's what kind of drew a certain surrounding crowd maybe? Or was it something else? Was it maybe just more focused on the mindset you had, which was an unhealthy one?
Initially, I think it was part of the Cool Kids Club. I wanted it because everybody else did. But when I was in it, I realized how much I didn't want to be a part of it. But then the itch is there, right? You see the glitter and the glitz and glam, and maybe people see us podcasting and they think, I'm going to want to do a podcast too. But when they put down the effort, they realize this is pulling teeth for them. And that's not for everybody. It's okay. Bodybuilding, not for everybody.
Yeah.
Totally okay. But I feel like it's the big part of it was when I realized all the things that I was wanting to strip versus the things I wanted to give and gain from. And I felt like when I was in bodybuilding, I was constantly stripping nutrients, stripping my body, stripping my muscle, actually stripping myself of the gains that I had put on. Worked for, right? And instead, I like being the girl that's focusing on, and rather than going to the gym and being like, oh my gosh, I only burnt 200 calories today. What about I burnt 200 calories doing a strength training leg day, and I got a PR for a squat with an extra rep, or I got, an extra 10 pounds on there. And you look at that growth rather than what you didn't take away from yourself enough. So the negative part, if you didn't get enough negative, why not focus on getting more of the positive, the opposite end of it?
Yeah.
And that came from me thinking about, rather than trying to cut calories, why don't I just live a life where I'm trying to get more protein? Rather than trying to get more cardio, why don't I do something where I'm just more active throughout the day? Right. So it's like, how many calories can I cut versus like, how active can I just be and like spread my energy into other people? Can I go and actually pick up my groceries? Can I go and do all these things? So I think the sense of independence comes from it. But I love that bodybuilding has taught me about community as well as independence, the support of both.
I love that. So the coaching identity has evolved over time, from just fitness to now this holistic approach of that balance with your expertise in mind, of course, with whoever is looking to work with you of fitness. But what inspired you to start your podcast? What is your goal with the M3 podcast? Tell us what the M3 stands for as well.
I feel like I'm doing everything to dance around actually producing music and singing publicly. So I started to pull out the microphone. Like you said, or like you see here, I've said I have all this equipment. I just don't understand it. I don't know how to use it. And one of my bigger insecurities is I know I'm a smart person, but my side with science or linguistics has come from me having an insecurity with Spanish speaking, right? Not being able to speak English. So I wanted to be really good at speaking English. Really well, right? We talk about the grammar, but I love the idea of people who are into tech and AI right now. It's fascinating to me. Bitcoin, cryptocurrency. I'm having conversations with people around it because I'm uncomfortable. Podcasting and the tech side of things and editing, right? It's kind of the same thing. It's really uncomfortable. I didn't get into the fitness field to learn tech, but I'm very fascinated by it, and it's only going to make my business better, developing different skills beyond what I used to be passionate about, because we develop new passions throughout our lifetime. So why not pick up all the skills that we can get?
Yeah. Yeah. So, wow. So I'm gathering what you're saying here is you can pursue something that you think you want to do and then learn after trying it that there's actually something else that's calling you. So I asked you about your podcast, and you talked about singing.
You like that? Right? Yeah, I just diverted the question again. I realized that too. I was like, we're still going to avoid this, but you got the answer. So singing is something I do love. I'm very passionate about, but I also really like this. And you and I had mentioned the relationship part. I wouldn't have as many deep connections with people I might have been friends with a little bit in passing, seen at the gym right here and there, but to invite into our homes and to make them feel that sense of that welcome, hospitable warmth and love that I had at Katie's Cafe. And I've worked in hotels, I've worked in restaurants, right? So it's like that same environment you and I understand. And I feel like being from Hawaii, you get that everywhere, not just in restaurants.
Sure.
Hopefully.
Sure. Well, yeah, no, and it's a good point. And it feels like us doing our podcasts is like a supplement to, well, one, to creating this community that we actively, intentionally seek for our own growth. And that's certainly happened with me, with all the great people I've become friends with and become closer with on my podcast. And I'm sure the same for you. Right. But it also will give us clarity in having these real deep conversations on what direction we actually do want to go. And I've more recently found that myself with this new business I'm working on, Legacy Capsule.
Yes.
As well. So I'm glad that we have a very similar journey with, at least when the podcast came up in our lives. We've kind of gotten started with this at a similar time. We've talked a little bit about our experience doing it. And you're going through this transition as well. You're going back to this holistic coaching approach with, fitness being at the core, but this focus on helping people in the parts that they don't really think about when they look to hire a fitness coach.
I mean, podcasting is like my form of therapy. I'm not a big fan of talk therapy. And so this gets me to have that fulfillment from it.
Yeah.
I also, that's like my past triggers and stuff too. But I'm like, but then I also love podcasting for the schooling. I feel like I'm in class. I'm learning from somebody when I interview them. So hopefully you feel like you were in my classroom today, 100%. Learning something.
Oh yeah, I love it. And a lot of our conversation has been diving into just deep topics and focus on the mindfulness of it, the philosophy around it. But I love that podcasting is therapy and connecting with the people we want to connect with, having intentional, deep conversations that are uninterrupted. It's been such a blessing to do this. And I'm glad you've joined the train or the journey with that as well.
I know. Welcome. It's cool. You and I both. I think we started around the same time. You're about a little over a year. Yeah, exactly. And I'm just hitting the 1 year mark as well too.
Love it. So. Nice. Well, tell people quickly, what does your podcast focus on? What are the 3 M's?
So M3 is the podcast. It's defined by movement, mindset, and medicine. And I
love that name.
Thank you. Initially, I went for many years as Macro Mermaid and love mermaids, right?
I was going to say, I'm surprised it wasn't M4 with Mermaid.
Mermaid, right? Yeah. So love mermaids, love macros. And I realized, I was like, well, there's more than macros. It's micronutrients. There's minerals and vitamins and other aspects to it, right? Then to me, I realized medicine isn't just food, it's also the water we drink, the thoughts we eat. What are we consuming in our hearts and in our heads, not just in our stomachs? And then the movement part, I realized as I started doing strong lifting, I was like, oh, movement isn't just one type of thing, right? We have CrossFit training that accents different parts of fitness, but then strong lifting is something I'm very passionate about, heavy lifting, powerlifting. But then I also have been somebody who ran marathons and half marathons, and I have a big cardio background. So I know it to be that. Then movement could also be yoga and recovery and flexibility. Movement could also be how you compartmentalize your thoughts in your head. So just movement can have many definitions. Yeah. The last one to me was the mindset. And without the movement and without the, I was going to say you could have movement, you can have medicine, right? But if you don't have the right mindset, and I've seen this in research, marine biology days too, where I've seen a lot of studies with animals that neglected food that was healthy for them when they were healthy themselves. But if they were sick, they craved and only wanted, they disregarded everything except for the nutrient dense food that they found. And so it's funny how, like, if you don't have that right mindset, are you going to surrender to your gel cell that I just mentioned earlier? Or are you going to break free of that and allow yourself to grow with that medicine? And to me, medicine is, again, the way that you feel yourself, but the mindset is what's going to feed the medicine. Make the choice to actually take it, make the choice to actually take action, to move, right? So how are you going to feed yourself and how are you going to take action in this world?
I love that. I love the way you connect those three together in the systematic way that flows. What kind of people do you like to have on? And obviously you talk about these topics. It overlaps with a lot of what we've talked about. We haven't gotten too much into some of the more entrepreneurial tactical stuff yet. We'll do that in a second. But just on this topic of the 3Ms that you just described, like, what are the conversations like you have with people?
I mean, people I genuinely just want to pick their brains with. And I mean, a lot of them have been friends that I've met and known already. And then it kind of went, oh, you should meet this person. You should connect with this person. And the conversations continue from there. So I like having people who have either some sort of struggle they've been through. I want to know that life hasn't been all rainbows and butterflies. And I'm not here to trauma bond with people and know what they've gone through. I'm here to figure out the rising and how they pick themselves back up.
Wow. The resilience piece of it. The comeback.
For anybody amazing. Out there, I'm just going to give a little piece of advice. If you're trying to make a friend, don't trauma dump unless they're a really close friend that has the energetic space to hold for you, that will not carry that home with them. Make sure you ask for permission, just be the good friend that says, hey, do you have the space to hold for this? If not, be the friend that talks about, hey, I went through some struggles. And as you start to peel back the layers, you could share more, but build each other up. Be in that space that you create a strong foundation of, you remind each other of the growths that you've been through. What have you noticed as a big trend in your guests when they talk about how they've been resilient from coming back from some sort of trauma? So this ties into a course I'm creating, which of course I'm like, this could sound kind of salesy and I'm not trying to be that person, but like what I realize is it is beyond the exterior world for us, right? We're so fixated on the materials and the things that we want. And I went through a relationship with like, I don't want materials. I want to sell it all and I want to get rid of it all. But as we built a respect for ourselves in the inner world, it's going to reflect that exterior, tangible representation of the things that we've put into ourselves. And I believe that to be with the physique. I believe that to be with the house builds in the community. I believe that to be with our jobs and the businesses that we produce. And I feel like my biggest growth piece with that has been like, it's okay to start over from experience. So it's okay to fall down and pick yourself back up and start over from experience. And, starting over from the beginning, which you and I are kind of going through right now again, it doesn't have to be that way. It means that we can make it better. And so this time I'm not just coming back as your average coach. I am not here to just give you a fitness program. I want you to walk away knowing that you've taken the time frame that you've put into this and invested it for the rest of your life. And it comes from, to me, I've seen different levels of change that I've split up into 6. People are going to come to me for the physical, right? I want to lose 10 pounds. I want to step on stage. I want this. I want glutes. I want whatever. They're going to come to me for the physical part. So to me, I see there are things that we have kind of similar to boundaries. These are very similar to boundaries I've learned. We have a physical boundary. We have an emotional boundary. And I'm thinking like materials, right? Like somebody borrows your car and they crash it. That's a physical boundary that they're also material, right? Breaking.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it might turn into an emotional and a mental boundary if things build up later. So you have all these financial relationship, right? So for me, the physical is what people are going to see, but that's actually going to be the end result of what they get after. And I want them to get into the deeper part. So after the physical, the somatics to me is we get into the unconscious. And then from there, we get into the behavioral. So how is your unconscious driving your behavior? How can we change the behavior? Is the behavior stemming from an emotion? How can we change the emotion? Is that emotion replicating or maybe even changing your thoughts, right? Because we've seen, and I've seen in research too, that our thoughts last about 90 seconds, or our feelings last about 90 seconds. Then it becomes a thought that we're continuing to feel after that 90 seconds.
Yeah.
And that is where the mindset plays in. So if we can control, we understand that we feel something in our body, it's not always factual, recognize it, acknowledge it, and then move on to the thought process that responds to it and make it a healthy process and response as well. So then it goes from that mental part after I finish it to the final one is the environmental. And the environmental is different than the physical, meaning that the environmental is not just your physical body, but how you thrive in your community. And that's where I'm putting in a ripple effect retreat at the end of this. So I'm creating a course in June that people can start hopping in on. And it's not like you have to start at this time, or it's a go at your own pace, but there's coaching with it. But in that part of it, I want people to experience later down the road what that tangible piece is to create the ripple effect in their environmental change in life.
What a cool vision that is.
Thank you.
Wow. What has been the biggest challenge? It could be general or specific that you've experienced through this complicated, bumpy journey of being an entrepreneur.
Oh, the biggest challenge has been boundaries with myself. I even had this right now. I said, I'm like really proud. I was telling my friend, I finished my work, right? It was 6 o'clock. And they called me and they're like, Bree, it's 10 p.m. Like you're still on the computer. Do you understand when enough is enough? And I think for me, I said jokingly, most people are addicted to gambling and drugs and sex and whatever. And I'm addicted to working. And as funny as of a joke it is, I have to remind myself that I have this inner guilt inside that I'm not doing enough. I'm not helping enough people. I'm not purposeful enough in this world. And I mentioned earlier, I touched on it, that I went through a court case. That court case completely changed my life. That set me up for a way where I am comfortably financially free for the rest of my life, where I am choosing to be in a place to work harder. And I think that's part of the guilt is I don't want people to think that I was just given or earned, or like I'm here to, spend whatever on their money. It's not about that for me. Now the why completely changed when the financial part took out, and it says, how can I replicate this and make it bigger and better for them? How can I give somebody an incentive that maybe I can give them their cash back and create a sponsorship? How can I give back to them more and make them show up stronger? And that's what's been the biggest struggle that's turned into a big passion purpose that makes me feel like I can do greater things.
That's cool. And that explains a lot more of why you're so passionate about the house build, for example. Wow. Well, I think that aligns a lot with the next question I had for you, which is, what is the next big goal in your journey? And you answered it in a philosophical way, but do you have a more tangible or specific answer?
I want to help people work on their inner health and not just their outer. I want to be known as the coach that doesn't just help people step on stage, but did the mental things and the emotional things that properly prep them for that stage as well. And maybe in life, the stage we get every day in life, right? And I see people come to me because I've had struggles that somehow they show up and they've been through similar things in life and they just need somebody to talk to. And I don't know how I attract that magically, but I'm like, wow, this person entered my life because I needed them just as much as they needed me.
Yeah.
Whether it was things like having relationships with sobriety, having relationships with sexual assault, having relationships with suicidal thoughts. These are deep, deep things that people go through. And I'm here to remind you, I'm real and going through it too, but I am hopefully paving a way that makes it smoother for you to walk through.
Yeah, that's so good, Bree. And I'm so thankful that you and I have connected and in a bigger way recently. Here we are doing this podcast because we do have a lot of overlap in our very real journeys that we're going through right now. And no, it's not all rainbows and butterflies. We're trying to walk through the maze and figure out what direction we are meant for. We're also getting more clear about that by having this conversation or these types of conversations on our podcasts with our guests and with each other. So I love that we have a similar approach of how we explore and look for this clarity.
I appreciate that acknowledgement. Thank you.
Absolutely. Do you have an idea of some sort of entrepreneurial life hack? It could be, again, specific or general, a mindset or something like very small and specific that goes against the mainstream belief that's worked for you that you could share with the audience.
I know this probably sounds super out there when people talk about their holistic practices that they're all in now, but I am a huge fan of biohacking and having a regulated nervous system. If it doesn't feel good in my body when I ask the questions, it's a big fat no.
Ooh.
And if it does, then a big jumping, screaming yes. And I will ask myself, what are we hungry for today? Who do we want to talk to today? And I'll even, if a conversation feels weird and I'm like, whoa, I'm like, do we want to continue having this conversation? Nope. Bye. It's easy as that. Do you need to respond? No, not everything needs a response. Not every stimulus needs a reaction. So, yeah.
Well, I'll take that as a positive compliment since we are over time with you right now.
Thank you. I know, right? I'm like, sorry for my hair appointment. It's okay.
Hopefully they listen and then they'll...
This means so much more to me. And again, that also comes down to it is if you have a priority and something matters, make the time for it. There's always time in this world. Make the time for it.
I love it. Oh, well, Bree, what an amazing story. I love how we've talked about it all. We've covered it in a different way than I expected, but it still covered everything in this more philosophical and all-encompassing way. And I really like it. I'm so excited to see what people think of it and listen back to this. But is there anyone in your network who you would recommend I have on this show? Somebody else who's an entrepreneur or working on building something?
Yes, so many people, we know great people in this world. I have somebody, I actually want to recommend you two people.
Sure.
So somebody I am interviewing tomorrow, actually, and I met him through the other friend that I want to recommend you to. So the first person is big into AI and has a huge business that he also has like a credit card loan company. He's a multi-entrepreneur. And he has this hobby that is my dream place. And I want you to go check it out because I have a feeling you'll really love the place. Okay. It's called Longevity Labs. They have a podcast studio in there, a workspace in there. You have a cold plunge, a hot tub sauna, I think they have a hot tub now. The sauna space, they have a hyperbaric chamber, they have a cryotherapy, they have a gym space in the back area, and then they just park all their like toy of cars like in a row. It's super cute. And he has multiple planes. So Nathan Leathers is one of my friends, and I will make sure that I reach out to him about you tomorrow because I think that you would love to pick his brain as well. And he has some very inspirational parts of his life that I saw and was like, I need this. And again, remember, we think we see somebody doing all the things and we want that same part, but a physical space is just not for me. And I'm okay with that. I like the remote life and he likes the physical space and that's cool for him. So he's number one. Number two is one of my dear friends, Mike Sherbakoff. Mike is somebody who inspired me to start my business. He inspired me to go on the house built. He inspired me to travel the world and where I went to Bali, so I've known this person for half my life and they are a veteran who's invested in I couldn't even say this, the investments for financial veteran funds. It's veteran fund place. But yeah, so it's like businesses for people who are veterans who are starting a launch or like they're kickstarting a business and he's helping them launch their businesses and getting investors connected with them who want to help people. So,
very cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for both of those recs and I'll follow up about getting in touch.
Yes.
Yeah. And I hope you have a great conversation with him. You said tomorrow.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. Well, cool. Well, Bree, is there anything else that we didn't cover that you want to share with the audience?
Read books.
Read books.
Read books.
Entrepreneur Life Hack Part 2.
Call your
Read
friends.
books. Call your friends.
Tell your family you love them every day. If you have a partner, tell them they're beautiful and you love them every day. Just keep being kind. Keep showing up. and life's going to continue. So we have to as well.
Nicely said. How can people find you, Bree? Your social media, if people want to work with you?
Yeah, I am at Instagram. Everybody I think is right now. It's the cool place to hang out. And I can't get off it. So my Instagram is at Breanna, Breanna, Danielle, Danielle, with the initial B at the end. So Breanna Danielle B. And I am changing my website right now. So in the next week, it'll switch from mermaidmethod.com. You can look for that. If not, it's not there anymore. It probably won't be. It is now going to be called the m3method.com.
Love it.
Or actually, it actually might be my name too. I'm still figuring that out as we go through the revamp, right? We're playing around with stuff. So it might be Breanna Danielle, might be that. So we'll figure it out.
I love it.
I'll put it up there for the show notes for you.
Perfect. All right. Well, Bree, thanks so much for chatting with me and having me over. Really cool to learn more about you and dive into your experiences. And I'm excited to continue getting to know you better and watching your journey as we both navigate this maze of a journey that we're on.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Bye, everybody. Thanks for joining me for this episode of the Nichols and Dimes Show. Please hit the subscribe button on YouTube and follow my Instagram page at Nichols and Dimes. The podcast Instagram page is at Nichols and Dimes Show. And please like any of the videos you come across on either platform and leave a comment, leave feedback. It helps me to improve and innovate and to continue to scale and bring more interesting guests to the Nichols and Dimes Show. Thank you all for the support, and we'll see you next time.